Good morning. I guess I get to start. So I don't know how many have never heard me speak before. Wow, quite a few new ones here. Anyway, yes, I've been at this a long, long time, and actually I got introduced to organic biological agriculture in the mid-'70s. Of course, that was when the first movement got going, and I tell everybody I've been around so long that when Organic Valley talked about starting and doing organic milk, I told them it was a really dumb idea because there's a bunch of hippies in the hollow don't even drink milk. Well, I guess that one wrong, didn't I? And so, but you know, that turned into a billion-dollar business, and so it's nice to see the changes. And so I'm a dairy nutritionist by training, and Joel and I have done things together and teamed up before on different events. And so this one's about crop rotation. Of course, I get the end of the day is about cover crops, and there's going to be a little bit of an overlap. I got a few points and messages I like to bring out, and so I've been involved in business and working with farmers all over this countryside for a long time. That is our farm, and yes, we can buy land for about $3,500 an acre. Now the trouble is, only 1/3 of it's decent. So if you add that up, that's $10,000 an acre for every good piece of land we ever buy to farm on. So it's no different than if I bought really good land in Illinois. My son always said, why did we settle in those hills and these rough farming land? Why didn't you settle on some nice black, rich ground? Well, I said, why didn't, when you were 1 year old, tell me you wanted to farm, and I would have. We bought that farm when he was 1 year old. So anyway, that's our dairy farm, and we do have a dairy herd. So I'm going to talk in two different sections about rotations. One on a dairy farm, and I hope I get my points across, and the other one on crop rotation. We used to be a 300-cow dairy farm and farming 600 acres, and now we're a 180-cow dairy farm, 100% forage. It took all the grain away from the cows. Now, if everybody did that in the dairy world, there'd be a shortage of milk, and we'd all get paid more. But that's not what farmers do. They all want to produce more, don't they? So, and then we now farm about 1,500 acres. So we're cash croppers on top of the dairy farm. Our facilities really, we made a terrible mistake when my son was 16 years old. He bought that farm, and he wanted to milk cows. And so, man, we cobbled the old barn together and put a parlor in. We should have built the state-of-the-art, brand-new dairy setup in the middle of this field. And now old barn's falling down and facilities wore out. And now it's not $1 million to build it anymore. It's $4 million. And so I guess we aren't sure what we're going to do. So anyway, that slide is up there. That's, I think, some seed corn you're looking at. I was teaching at a tech college in Minnesota in the 70s when I got introduced to soils. I'm a dairy nutritionist and had outside speakers come in, and Brookside Laboratory Farms in Albrecht, I joined them as a consultant in the 70s. I got introduced to soils. And soils and cows are very, very similar. They're both systems that are biological systems, if you want to think about it. So anyway, because I was an educator and I have a business, I have written this is my third book. I'm not doing it again. It's now 500 pages. It came out a year ago. I completely revised it with my daughter Leilani, and so I can't say anything more, but it's always about a system. This is a system, and so when we talk about rotations, that's one part of the system. We're really big on fertility and managing nutrients and soil fertility to make the system work. And so this part of this is on the dairy herd, and we do graze. And right now, with the grazing standards, we have to get 60% of their diet intake from pastures and forages, and so grazing part. So I tell people the whole secret to both crop farming and dairy farming is you first have to get that. If you can't figure out how to get a super quality, heavy mineralized forage, you see, as an organic farmer, you can't buy the commercial inputs. Where do they come from? Inside your forages or your cover crops. So now my nutrients are trapped in that crop. So first you got to get that beautiful, thick, lush stand, whatever it might be. And so now as that breaks down, then you're going to have to learn the management of that crop to make this thing successful from my experience in all my career. So that kind of a crop there. And then the other thing is that we're really big on the soil fertility thing, so we're organic and we can't buy nitrogen. And so I drive my calcium and phosphorus are the first two things I want to fix on farms and soils. And so you get those really high. That's 17 pounds of alfalfa and 10 pounds of grass. Where's the grass? We struggle to grow grasses because we fertilize for legumes, and we're so legume dominated that it doesn't seem. If I put on 100 units of N and kept my phosphorus and calcium low, that would be all grass. We take over a piece of land, and within 3 years of farming it, the quackgrass is gone. We cannot grow grasses. We have a real struggle. Then the other question I say, first you got to figure out how to get that stand in a rotation. And if I go back on that a little bit, when I first started farming, as a dairy nutritionist, we'd put seeding down a field of alfalfa, let's say, and we would leave it in alfalfa for 4 or 5 years and then maybe grow corn. And so I bought an airway. You know what that is? Poke holes in the ground. You know what that was for? To poke holes in the ground so we could spread manure on hay, because I kept seeing alfalfa hay is taking off all the minerals and all the organic matter. And after 3 or 4 years, when the stand had petered out, we'd turn it into corn. And so I bought this airway to try to get manure back out there. We got rid of that. You know why? We changed our rotation. You have to be willing. How many dairy farmers are in here, by the way? Am I talking to myself? Okay. All right, just checking. You have to be willing, just like when I talk about cover crops, you have to be willing to give it up. Are you willing to go in that field and tear that up and turn that back in the ground? So we treat our soils like you treat a cow. If you want to get 100 pounds of milk out of a cow, you can't feed her junk food and mature, I don't want to pick on mature ryegrass. You see it's got its issues because where do you get your soluble nutrients? So if you take that and put it back in the ground, you can feed that to a cow and get 100 pounds of milk. You can put that back in the soil and grow 200 bushel corn. It's pretty simple. Now, if this is the kind of stand you got, if this is what you're doing for stands, you better figure out how to get beyond this. Because, see, I really rotate. So we run a real tight rotation. We're down to a seeding year and 2 years most, and that's on a hillside. We keep it in 3 years. On our flat level ground, 1 year only, the seeding year. We seed it in the spring with winter wheat as a nurse crop, and then we make our 4 cuttings of hay. And then we put manure on it in the fall. In the following spring, when the alfalfa gets so tall, we turn it down. But if that's your stand, see, you don't have anything to feed your soil. You need this. So it's not just about rotation. The purpose of rotation is not only to get nutrients in cycle, but it's also to change and deal with the biology. So this tight rotation thing, 1 year corn, 1 year cover, 1 year alfalfa, actually does not work too bad if you think about it. And so this is another method. This is triticale peas that we would grow as a forage crop if I was going to seed it down. And then we'll make 2 more cuttings. And so we got our rotation is we have to grow forages in this rotation. So there it is. Neighbors drive by and they say, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm feeding my corn." And so if I had a stand like that, we would never tear that up if we had one like that. See, you got to get that different mindset. We get excited about that because I know what that leads to. And not only that, you don't get to see, there's one more thing, and I'll throw that out as we go along. And what that does for you is you got to learn how to manage it. Because, see, now we're real believers in shallow incorporating, and I know we talked about some of this yesterday. See, just like on everybody has to till or not to till, that is the question. See, the no-till guys taught us we can't plow, dig, and disc every year. You'll destroy soils. And the strip-till guys taught us that you can't disturb middle zone. You can do anything you want to the top couple inches. But middle zone, where the roots and the earthworm channels are, you can run rippers in the ground, 20, 30 inches apart for aeration and water infiltration, as wet as it was last year. And but you can do everything shallow. So obviously we got shallow incorporating residues because, see, the fence post rots up off here. But we refuse to run chisel plows and moldboard plows because they tear up middle zone. If I don't run a moldboard plow, I'm going to go 3-4 inches deep. Now, I got to back off of that. I say shallow incorporating because what if your cover crop or your residue or whatever, if I let that get waist high, now what does shallow incorporating look like? See, I got to go then deeper, but I'm not ever tilling on bare ground if we can help it. So what you're seeing, that stuff right there is some pretty nice alfalfa going down. Now, that's done a little before I would like to. Now, my son is a pretty high-strung, high-energy guy. I don't know where he got it from, but he can't wait. So we err on the early side all the time. So we could have produced a little more organic matter. And what is that stuff? Highly digestible, highly soluble, and if you came back 1 week after we did that, you will not know the crop we put down. It's gone, it's digested. That's our fertilizer in our rotation. And of course, then we grow a crop like this. This is some silage corn, and now that we're all forages, we don't need to do that. And that was interseeded. We're talking about rotations here, and so we're trying to get something interseeded. It doesn't really look very good, does it? You can't grow 10-foot tall corn and have it all shaded out and expect it to do well. So, again, we're back to the cow. So the soils in the cow are both the same things. On the right-hand side, on the dairy cow, in the animal stomach, we're always balancing energy to protein, and we're dealing with a word called digestibility, and we're balancing minerals. On the soils, it is no different. Now, as an organic farmer, you can't buy that nitrogen to balance that out. So putting corn stalks or putting a mature rye back in the ground and growing corn is never going to be really, where's your soluble nutrients coming from? Where's your fertilizer coming? Now, you can dump a bunch of chicken manure on, I suppose, but that's got its limits also. This is at Penn State. Not picking on Penn State, but I do travel a lot. And what you really see, I went to their field days. So I'll show some pictures later. And the thing on the left there, and I guess it'd be your left, that was hairy vetch. And it had the most nitrogen credits. It was a big mature crop of hairy vetch. I didn't get to see it, and then they planted corn. And the one on the right was a young succulent red clover crop. And the scientists said, we don't understand what's going on. We have a lot more nitrogen credits on that vetch than we do on that clover. And of course, I'm standing there, and I can't keep my mouth shut. And I said, yeah, but one of them was digestible and one was not. You take that mature alfalfa, or take that mature hairy vetch, or you go back to farming like it was when I was a kid, you made your first crop hay the 4th of July. Come on, it's not digestible. Those nutrients might be there, but the soil life is going to eat first. And so if you're going to rotate these things, you've got to manage how you're going to manage those things. And so the soil life eating first, that vetch is breaking down. There's nitrogen credits there, but there's also complex carbons. And it's hard to digest and hard to eat. And so they're tied up those nutrients until they can release them. So it isn't about nitrogen credits. In fact, the biggest struggle I have is we use grasses for our nitrogen source. Come on. It's not about nitrogen credits only. It's about some other things. So I came up with this little thing here with some help from somebody, is that the green carbon, the young green succulent stuff, is what you want to put in front of a crop that you want to get to digest. That digests really fast and does not put a drag on your soil. That's all, because that's going to digest. The brown carbon, and there's corn stalks, mature rye, any kind of mature crop, oats, stubble, straw, is going to really be hard to digest. And if you're going to put another crop in there that needs soluble nutrients, they're going to starve, because remember, the soil life eats first. Everybody says, oh, you got to work that rye down 3 weeks before you plant. How about 12 hours? But it's not dead and big and mature. And there's a huge difference. There's a huge difference. And the black carbon, we're all trying to sequester carbon. See, just like all the research, I'm not picking on researchers here. I like picking on Joel. He's fun to pick on, but that's okay. Is that for years and years and years, oh, you got to have that brown carbon to build black carbon. Now what's the research say? No. It's the sugars. It's the liquid carbon that builds your complex humuses in your soil. As much as it is it's not just because complex carbons just means it's not all digested down yet and turned into humus. But that comes as much from liquid as it does from the sugars. You see, another argument story got out here. I'm always trying to correct myths out here. The other story got out here that our soils are too bacteria dominated. If you're organic, you better learn how to be bacteria dominated, because that's where you get your soluble nutrients. Now, everybody says, talking about those things, and everybody talks about that. And I said, you see, it took us 20 years to raise our organic matter 1%. It didn't go down 1%, did it? And we, as a dairy farm, until when we had 600 acres and 300 cows, all the corn stalks got baled up for bedding. All the straw got taken. We left no complex carbons on the field. And now that we're beyond that and we're growing cash crops, we're leaving complex carbons out there. So now the soils are going to change even more, because we stayed in the high digestible stage. So the brown carbons and things, there's a combination of things all over. But the brown carbon is the carbon to nitrogen ratio. You see the fungal population, you eat straw. Us dairy guys got TMRs to blend it all together for a really good reason, because the bacteria guys that eat the easy sugars, easy to digest, they can populate and take over real quick. And so that's why if we fed corn in the morning and then hay later in the day, that really doesn't work. We mix it all together so the population stays more uniform. And you do the same thing on your soils. The fungus, the bacteria only lives a short period of time, and then when the fungus eat them, see that high nitrogen level come out of the bacteria provides nutrients, and the poop coming out of I don't know if this is true or not, you can correct me. The poop coming out of the fungi and the protozoa is really high in protein and high in nitrogen. That's how we get our nitrogen. Works for me. That right there, we now switch on our dairy herd. We would take that off because we're all forages. We would cut that as a forage. That's the very, very last day I would put that in the ground to grow corn. That's about 6 inches taller than I'd like it to be. If I took it down when it was 6, 8 inches tall and put it back in the soil, if I chopped that and fed it to my cows, it's highly digestible. That becomes bacteria food and becomes a nitrogen source. See, now if I let it get more mature than that, now it becomes fungal food, and it's going to put a drag on my nitrogen supply to my crop that I need to grow. So in our all forage diet, we started growing sorghum and grass, and we didn't have much of a success with it, but we grew it. Last year it rained all the time, and it got too big when we chopped it. But anyway, this is going to be we grew that rye in a rotation after soybeans, and then, or after corn silage it might have been. And then we took the rye and baled it up for cows for forages. Then we planted sorghum and grass, underseeded with clover. Now we're going to put a cocktail mix in here to feed our dairy cows. And we made 2 cuttings. And then this is underseeded clover, under that sorghum and grass. And last fall, we went back into it. Everybody going, no, see, we want to minimize till things. See, I don't want to till it back up. So we started with a clover mix, even though we knew it wasn't going to be great. And then after that last cutting of grass, the no-till drill, not the no-till, just a regular big 30-foot grain drill. And in we go, and we put radishes, and we put more clover, and we put other things in with it to plant it. Now, last fall was not very nice for getting a lot of growth. And this spring now, when that clover and alfalfa and whatever comes up gets a foot tall, mostly clover, we will then take that down, and that'll be corn. Because now we've fed it all the nutrients in just a 1-year rotation. It's just a 1 year out of corn. Now, this is an interesting one because this is more complex. And see, the other thing is we farm, I like to use round numbers. Let's say we farmed 1,000 acres. If I grew bumper crops on 800 acres and 200 acres were failures, you know what? I'd rather be in that spot than grow half-assed crops on all 1,000. So if we look at our averages out here, this year was a green bean contract from the canning factory, and they wanted us to plant it on May 13th. We're kind of done with the canning factory. May 13th, it was so cold, the green beans didn't come up. And they half rotted and half a stand, and they wouldn't pull the plug on them. They finally said, okay, pull the plug. Our neighbors got a good fine tank. We put this next to the highway, so that way they don't get into organic, and I got the markers to myself. This is how this works. So they all laughed. They forgot that we got a $17,000 check for those 40 acres because they didn't harvest them. But anyway, they don't know that. So I turned it down finally, and we run our big Lemken dish. Now, shallow and corporate, you may look at that and say, my gosh, are you rolling or crimping, or are you tilling it in the soil? This is irrigated ground. So then this is probably in the end of June, July, and then we put another cover crop following this thing. So we had to till this one twice. There's a lot of residues. It's pretty hard to go plant in there, but there's a lot of green and brown complex carbons. This is something you would feed the cow, and you won't get your 100 pounds of milk on it. But we're digesting that and putting a lot back into the soil. Then we follow, this isn't the exact same field, with this cocktail mix, which is oats. We're really big on our oats in our rotation because oats is cheap to do. And then after that was done, then we on our rotation, so now we got oats and brassicas and tiller radish and you name it. That's a cocktail mix. And then so that went down, and then we grew seed corn. This is 84 bushel seed corn. Our contract says we have to have 40 bushel. This is a very profitable crop for us. And so this is some really high quality seed corn, but the yields were double what we expected to have on our contracts. But you see, look what we did to get there. It's no magic, folks. Look what we did to get there. We fed it that succulent little crop when those clovers got big that spring, and weed control is pretty easy. So rotation's about providing nutrients. Rotation is always about giving a variety for soil health. Rotation's about, and another thing about rotations that we're talking about today is also that manure fits in that rotation, because that's another biological food. I'm trying to get a diversity of biological life in my soil, so I can't grow corn on corn because the bugs living on corn will have a favor, and next thing you know, I got diseases and insect problems. Way back 20 years ago, I grew corn on corn for 10 years in a row. The old organic standards, by the way, folks, said 2 row crops out of 5 is all you could do. The other 3 years had to be hay or oats or a small grain. The new standards don't say that. But 10 years of corn on corn on corn on corn. Someone said, how in the world? I had University of Illinois entomologists came up and they said, how come there's no disease or bugs? I said, I interseeded it with a cover crop and I put manure on it. So there was no rotation really, except the cover crop. You see, this is another one of our favorite rotations. So we got to have a rotation. We can't just do corn, beans, and seed corn might make us the most money. Maybe we tightened our rotations up a lot. But see, we love growing oats. And now, you see, whether we combine or not, we don't really care. You see, because we don't look at what we make on the crop. We make what we make on the rotation. My son would like to net $700 an acre across the rotation. So the corn, we might make $2,000. And then on this one here, we might make $300 or nothing. But now average it out over the rotation. See, that's underseeded with clover and alfalfa. And like last year, the clover and the alfalfa exceeded the oat growth. And why there's some of it clipped on the front side? There were weeds in it. We refused to let weeds go to seed in our soil building kind of a year. And so then this is a field that just went through 2 years of transition. We're talking about rotations. So we did that oats, underseeded with clover. And then in the fall, we were going to just put it all back in the ground. Not harvest anything for 2 years. We don't farm conventional land. We don't grow conventional crops. I am not going to do all that paperwork. We are only organic. We just finished transitioning 300 acres. I know it's a big drain on us, cost-wise. We took the soil test. We put all the minerals back out there. We grew the oats. And then last fall, we tilled that back in. And a year ago in the fall. And then last spring, we went back and planted the oats again, underseeded with clover and alfalfa. And this is what it looked like last fall. Next year, that's organic. And I'll tell you one thing, and you'll change those soils dramatically. Whether we combined the oats because the local feed mill, nobody would grow oats anymore, and they wanted some conventional oats. And so they brought their trucks and parked them. We combined some, and then it got to raining, and we just quit. So it all stayed out there. And of course, then in the fall, with all that green stuff growing, now is when I want to put my manure on. I want that manure to get part of that carbon biological cycle. I like to put manure on bare ground before I plant a corn crop. I just fertilize the weeds, folks. I want it to be in that forage. I want it to be in that forage. And of course, this is what it looks like the following spring. Now that goes down with all the brown carbon mixed with green carbon, and that goes down, and now that'll be corn. And you see how nice that stand is? You got to be able to get that. And this here is another example. My time is kind of running out here, but see, this was barley, winter barley, and in the springtime we frost seeded 10 pounds of red clover with a four-wheeler. 30 acres in a half hour you can plant, real fast, just spin around. And then we measured, you see, because if you look at that crop, you see, you can say, well, you can see the wheel tracks in it because we also spread manure. And I had an intern working for me, so we took several measurements across that farm of 1 square foot, roots and all, as best we could measure it, and those were the nutrients that were in it. You can say we started that growing season with 200 units of N from nitrogen credits, not considering the fact that it fed bacteria. They want to do a nitrous oxide study on my farm, and I won't let them because we started that season, and my calculation was over 300 units of N going into our corn crop. It's a little bit extreme. But look at all those nutrients. They're time released, and as long as the plant's breaking down and doesn't put a drag on my soil, that's my fertilizer being time released during the growing season, and some are pretty rapidly. And that's the seed corn we get out of it. And then we do rye in rotation also, and we take rye where we're going to have extra, let's say there's extra weed pressure, we'll combine some rye for our own seed, and then of course after the rye, we actually seed in the spring, we underseed that with some alfalfa we started just a year ago. It's hit and miss kind of, but then we can go over there and plant it. See, now the rye is headed out. What crop do you think we're going to plant there? Soybeans. We would never plant corn in that. It's too complex. It's too mature. That's dry cow feed. You feed soybeans like you feed a dry cow. You feed corn like you feed a milking cow. And then you look at the feeds you're going to feed them in your rotation and how you're going to feed it. And see all that residue on top? We can go right in there in that same day and plant. I know all these guys talked about that. We don't have a tine weeder. You know why? We plant in furrows. You get your row cleaners and move that aside. All that residue, all that rye straw, how many weeds can grow out of that? There's no soil seed contact. We're planting down in those furrows, and when you rotary hoe and cultivate, it's easier to bury a weed if you start below ground, and starting on top, you have to pile everything up. So that's why we can go right in there that next day and plant, and that's how we get away with it. We take that rye down, and by the way, this is planted. We plant corn about the 3rd week in May. We make hay. Then we start soybeans not until the 10th of June. And the reason for that is we can't get all the work done, and we got to spread our workload out. That's 84 bushel beans following that rye crop. And this is where I showed you the sorghum sudan grass in that same picture. And this was 84 bushel beans 2 years ago on that field. And you see it's pretty easy to control weeds when you don't feed them. So that's our rotations. You got that all? I'm so conscious of the time up here. Yeah, I've been accused of speaking 1,000 words a minute with gusts up to 2,000. I just wanted to get an overall painting picture of how we think and how we think about rotations.
All right, thank you. So